the best defenders to buy in FPL for game week 1. Today, we're going to go through all the defenders that I'm considering buying into my team. We'll look at premiums, we'll look at mid-price options, we'll look at those bargain defenders as well. So today, it is those top defenders. Who should you be picking for game week 1 of FPL? What is up, everyone? Harry here. Before we dive in, 1,000 likes is the aim. Subscribe if you are new around here as well. Today, we are having a look at the best defenders for you for game week 1. We'll talk about premiums, cheap options. We'll talk about how much you should be investing in defense. Everything covered in this video. Before we dive in, this video is being sponsored by FFScout. If you want to see where I get all the data for it, look at fixture tickers, all of that, player comparisons, you can check that out in their members area. They're offering 40% off at the moment. You can check with the link in the description. And very excitingly, both for free members and for those of you paying for the premium service, they have launched their app over the past few days, and I've been on it pretty non-stop. You have the ability to check your live rank. You have the ability to plan your team for future weeks using Plan FPL, plus use player comparisons and fixture tickers all on the app on your phone, both on iOS and on Android as well. So a little bit of an extra sort of incentive there. Do definitely check it out, whether you're a paying member or whether you just want to go and download it. Go and have a look at it because it is really exciting what they've done with it. But today we are having a look at those defenders, and today we're going to start off with those premium defenders. We're looking from 6 million up to 6.5, 7 million, all the way up to Trent. We don't have a few of the options in here. I've selected the ones I think are the best. So there's no Gvardiol in here. You don't have any other Arsenal defenders apart from Saliba and Ben White. And there's, of course, no Kieran Trippier in here because we don't even know if he's going to be a Newcastle player. And even if he is a Newcastle player, 6 million is just too much to be spending on him. Just briefly covering why I've got Saliba in here over Gvardiol. Of course, they've signed several other options that can play in that left centre-back spot. Plus, of course, they can have Julian Timber, who's fully fit. Saliba and Ben White feel like the two defenders who are fully nailed going into the start of the season. I do think Gvardiol will start. But for me, if I was spending that much, I would just go for the more safe option in Saliba. So looking at some of these options, the other caveat to add is, are these players going to be back available for the start of the season, particularly looking at Trent. Trent is expected to return back to Liverpool training midway through this week, so probably on Wednesday. It gives him a week and a half before the first game of the Premier League season. So I do think there is the ability for him to start. I think that is still the most likely scenario, given we've been seeing him on social media doing some sort of fitness conditioning over the past few days. He looks like he's already up to speed in terms to fitness. It's just whether they can get him up to speed from a tactical standpoint going into the start of the season, because of course it is a completely new manager and system that he will be playing under. When you look at terms of the underlying data, last season the points per 90 were not quite as good. You would of course pick an Arsenal defender over Trent last season, but the underlying data is really strong. And going into the new season, if we expect him to play in that right back inverted into midfield role, last season that right backs for Arne Slot's team scored 8 goals. And I do think Trent will be a fantastic option. Given the opening run of fixtures for Liverpool, if you have the money to invest there, I think you should go and do it. Now, Van Dijk is the other option on this list. If Robertson is fit for the start of the season, we can absolutely look at him. But while he's a bit of a doubt, I've gone with Van Dijk on the list. I absolutely think Trent is worth finding the 1 million extra over going for Van Dijk for the start of the season. If there's, of course, doubt if Trent's going to start game week 1, then maybe you opt for Van Dijk. But looking at the underlying attacking data, absolutely think Trent is worth the investment, and looking at where he might fall into Arne Slot's new system. Looking at Arsenal, Ben White and Saliba are both in here. Building drafts so far, I've been very sort of hot on just go for Saliba. Looking at some of the underlying attacking data, though, I do think the 0.5 may well be worth it on Ben White over Saliba if you have the money. Now, going Trent and Ben White in the same draft might be pretty difficult. That is a lot of money that you are looking to be spending in your defense. So I can understand why Saliba is so much more popular, but I do think that Ben White does have the additional attacking threat. He is good for bonus. Now, defenders will get less bonus points this year, so maybe the disparity is not as great as we might see in previous years, particularly because Ben White is the type of defender that deals in big chances. He doesn't make lots of shots. He doesn't get fouled loads, which is what you need for defenders to pick up more bonus this year. So going into game week 1, Saliba versus Ben White might be something that you just save 0.5 on. But I do think Ben White is going massively under the radar, given some of the data we have from last season. The final one we've got on here is Gvardiol of Manchester City. And looking at the way he ended last season in particular, his attacking data was even better than the 0.2 you've got here, which is only second behind Trent. I do think that Gvardiol, for me, given the run of fixtures that we have for the start of the season, is my favourite 6 million option. Arsenal, of course, have 3 tough away games in their first 5. So if you look at the first 3, it looks good. But after that, they go away to Spurs and then away to Manchester City, which isn't the best start for them. So I do think I like Trent and Gvardiol. They are my top 2. If you want to look outside of that, I would go Arsenal over Van Dijk. I would probably find the 0.5 to buy Ben White over Saliba if you can afford it. But Gvardiol first, probably Trent second in terms of importance. I do like Arsenal defenders, particularly for the long run. Now, moving down a bit of budget, you've got Pedro Porro, who's absolutely flying in pre-season, and then Munoz of Crystal Palace, who hasn't actually returned quite yet to Crystal Palace. You could also look at Mitchell of Crystal Palace, who did score in their most recent friendly against West Ham. Pedro Porro is 27% owned, whereas Munoz and Mitchell are much, much lower owned at both under 5%. Now, in terms of the attacking output, you do have Pedro Porro being slightly better for attacking output. He also took a lot of set pieces last year because we saw James Maddison injured for a prolonged period of time. Now, when Maddison came back into the team, we did see Porro take less set pieces. And at the end of the season, Munoz and Mitchell, both of Crystal Palace, saw their attacking data get much better under their new manager. So although when you look at the data for the season last season, you do see Pedro Porro massively outscore Munoz, I don't think it will be that different actually under the systems that we've got now. Plus, when you look at the defensive data, Crystal Palace's was so much stronger and got even stronger at the end of the season under the new manager Glasner when you're comparing to Pedro Porro under Ange Postecoglou. I actually think that Munoz at 5 million is a better option to start the season than Porro. Porro has been really good in pre-season and those first 2 games do look really good. But when you look over the first 6 weeks, I actually think the Crystal Palace fixtures are better. The defensive data is better, and I don't think there's going to be much between them in terms of attacking data. It is just that pre-season form, and Porro did very well in game week 38 at the end of last season. That is meaning a lot of people are opting for Pedro Porro over Munoz, but I'm not sure it's worth the 0.5 investment when you have such an attacking option in Mitchell and Munoz at 5 million compared to 5.5 of Pedro Porro. Now, having a look at those 4.5 options, again in here we've got a lot of my favourite options. There's not everyone in here. We don't have the Manchester United options and we don't have Leif Davis of Ipswich in this graphic at the moment. Now, the reason for that is I don't trust Manchester United defensively. I don't think their opening fixtures are good enough from a defensive point of view. And the 4.5 options at the moment in Martinez doesn't offer enough attacking threat. Leif Davis of Ipswich does have a nice fixture run from about game week 3 onwards and can be considered. The attacking threat is there, but I would rather start the season with a more solid, proven asset who's been in the Premier League before. Now, comparing some of the options that I really like in here, I don't love Van de Ven at 4.5. He is in here. Some people are starting to put him in drafts, but I would rather find the 0.5 to go for a Munoz or 1 million to go for Pedro Porro or for someone else on this list. Anderson of Crystal Palace is having a horrific start to pre-season, but he does have a little bit of attacking threat. My favourite options in this list are Robinson of Fulham and Mykolenko of Everton. Mykolenko back into the Everton lineup. He did take a couple of shots in that match. Robinson has picked up an assist in pre-season. They do look pretty good and they have a great run of fixtures as well. Konsa of Aston Villa will be the steady Eddie, but he only got 8 clean sheets last season. I don't massively love that. I think Konsa and Dan Burn are being slightly overhyped looking at their opening fixtures and looking at the data from last season. Now, focusing particularly in on Newcastle, there are a couple of options that we can consider here depending on what happens between now and the start of the season. This is Livramento and Lewis Hall. I actually think Lewis Hall has a very good chance of being the Newcastle starting left back for this season. He scored in pre-season and he looks really strong. And if Trippier was to leave, then Livramento would likely be their starting right back as well. I much prefer these over a Dan Burn pick. So if it's going into the season and we can't be assured of a Livramento or a Lewis Hall start, I'd probably avoid Newcastle defence altogether unless you're going Nick Pope in goal. Dan Burn for me is not a pick and he's not better than the likes of Robinson or Mykolenko. But Lewis Hall and Livramento, if they were nailed, do compete with the likes of Robinson and Mykolenko. So at the moment, at time of recording, Mykolenko is number 1 for me. Robinson is number 2. Probably Aina or Murillo at Nottingham Forest in at number 3, then Konsa, and then Dan Burn, and then Anderson. But if we were to potentially start to have a look at a Lewis Hall or a Livramento, they'd be right up at the top because of the attacking output that they have. Having a look at the 4.0 option, so again, we've only really got the 3 newly promoted teams in Southampton, Leicester, and Ipswich. Johnson has been playing in pre-season at right back, so he does have a little bit more attacking threat than the likes of Wout Faes or the likes of Harwood Bellis. out of those three, if you're not going for Barco, you just need to have a look at which one rotates best with the defenders that you've got. If it doesn't really matter, then I'd probably go with Johnson, just he's slightly more attacking, and some of their opening fixtures after the first two do start to look pretty good. But for me, Barco of Brighton is head and shoulders above the rest. We are expecting Estupiñán back in about game week 6 now, looking at the potential prognosis that we've got on him. But even when he does come back, we might see Barco still start at either left back or left wing back, with Estupiñán filling in as a left-sided centre-back in a back three. He is on some set pieces, and the ability to him to play alongside Estupiñán is definitely worth taking the gamble on him as your 5th defender. Now, if you're like me and you're going with 2 4.0s, then Barco should still definitely be one of them, because he's definitely much, much better than the others if he gets those starts over the first 4 or 5 weeks. And with the ability to play an early wildcard this season looking very, very popular, again, I think he should be in every single one of your drafts at 4 million. And then finally, just wrapping up by having a look at how much I think you should be investing in defense. You've got lots of different options here, from very premium, where you might have 3 starting premium defenders, to your very budget option where you've only got sort of 4.5 million options. I personally don't think the top or the bottom here is worthwhile. If you're going with 3 premium defenders, you aren't getting the value picks. There are so many good 4.5 options that I think it's worth going for either 2 premium defenders with 1 4.5, which is what I'm going with, or 1 premium defender and then 3 4.5 million options in terms of rotation. So you're looking at the 2 middle options here as probably what I'd recommend. I think there is good value in the likes of Trent, in the likes of Saliba, and the likes of Gvardiol. So personally, I think the second option here is where I'd be going, with 2 premium options, a 4.5, a 4.0, and then either a 4.5 or 4.0 as your 4th defender. And that is where I'm at the moment. It's what I built in my most recent draft with Mykolenko, with Barco, and then Wout Faes, or another 4.0 with Trent and Gvardiol is probably the best structure I look at. Do you think there is worthwhile putting some money in defense? I'm seeing some people have that completely base floor with lots of 4.5s. I think you will miss out on some of those top defenders in the likes of Saliba, Trent, and Gvardiol that we mentioned at the beginning that I do think are absolutely worth it. So I do think it's worth having some of those 4.5s, but also having a look at some of those premium defenders as well in your structure. So this is best defenders. This is the first part of a 3-day series where we're going to have a look at best defenders, best midfielders, and best forwards for Monday, Tuesday, Wednesday this week. All the data that is taken from those 3 videos is from the Fantasy Football Scout members area that we were all using all of last season, all of pre-season, all into the season as well. So check it out if you're interested. Drop any questions you have about defenders in the comment section down below. We're into the sort of week before the week of FPL. So it is time to be starting to see those first team lineups starting to come together. Of course, Haaland has just scored a hat-trick against Chelsea, which is meaning that a lot of drafts have changed. I did put Haaland in my draft, which was released on Saturday. So if you haven't checked that out as well, go and have a look at how I'm fitting Salah, Haaland, and Trent all into my draft at the moment. But that is all for me. I've whittled on enough. 1,000 likes is the aim. Subscribe if you're new around here, and I'll be back again very soon.